The hum of the Vanguard's engines was a constant reminder that the clock was ticking. Captain Elara Connolly stood at the helm of humanity's last hope, her eyes fixed on the holographic display that showed Earth's shattered orbit. 100 systems were on fire. The Oort Consortium had spread like a wildfire, burning through colonies, entire fleets, leaving only ash and broken worlds in their wake. She had no illusions left. The battle had already been lost. The fleet was scattered, and their defenses were barely holding. Earth, humanity's cradle, was on the brink of extinction. The message had come through loud and clear. The Oort Consortium's Lohk'ta, their ultimate predator, was already on its way. Elara, you need to see this. Lieutenant Calloway's voice broke through the calm, urgency lining his words. Turning sharply, Elara walked toward the operations table. A new transmission blinked on the screen. Calloway's fingers flew across the interface as he decrypted the message. The words that appeared next sent a shockwave through her chest. "We have it," Calloway muttered. "The Lohk'ta, it's closer than we thought." The holographic display shifted to a new image. A massive, monstrous form, almost godlike in its size, loomed in the foreground. Its flesh was a grotesque mix of scales and muscle, covered in jagged armor-like growths. It was a creature designed solely for destruction, its glowing eyes burning with an insatiable hunger. "How much time do we have?" Elara's voice was tight, her resolve hardening. "Less than 4 hours," Calloway replied, his fingers still hovering over the console as he reviewed the incoming data. "It's coming in fast. It's faster than we anticipated. We won't have time to mobilize a defense unless we act immediately." Elara clenched her fists. "Then we fight. Get the fleet ready. Every ship. Every fighter. Prepare for impact." Calloway's gaze flickered nervously to the corner of the room, where the rest of the officers were gathered. "Elara, with all due respect, we've lost 2/3 of our fleet already. We don't have the firepower to engage it directly. We can't stop that thing, not without the full strength of the military." "I don't care about the odds," she snapped, turning back to face Earth's deteriorating defenses. "We're not running, and we're not surrendering." The words hung in the air like a silent promise. Elara's voice was unwavering, and for all their fear, they listened to her. That was the thing about Elara Connolly, she never backed down. Not even when the situation seemed impossible. Across the comms, the steady voice of Commander Harris cut through the tension. "Captain, the fleet is forming up. We have just enough fighters to stall their advance." Elara nodded once, keeping her emotions locked tight. The Lohk'ta had been bred as the ultimate weapon. They were told it couldn't be stopped. Every piece of intelligence had warned them of its power. But she had something the enemy didn't, the will to fight for a future. "Send word to the remaining fleet. I want every fighter squadron in the air. We make our stand here, or we make it nowhere." Elara turned to Calloway. "What's our status on the defense grids?" He typed rapidly, pulling up a new set of data. "They're patchy at best. The Zenther shield is holding, but the power core is on the verge of failing. If the Lohk'ta hits it..." "I know," she said. "We'll buy as much time as we can." She pivoted toward the viewports of the Vanguard and locked her eyes on the Earth, now nothing more than a bruised orb in the distance. Humanity had fought for survival, but now, that fight was coming to an end. The Oort Consortium wasn't just here to conquer, they were here to annihilate. And their monstrous predator was their weapon of choice. "Sir," came another voice from the comms. "We have confirmation. The Lohk'ta is entering Earth's atmosphere. It's heading straight for the heart of the last line of defense." Elara's chest tightened. She didn't need to hear any more. She knew what that meant. The predator would strike with the fury of a storm, and humanity had nothing left to stop it. "Deploy all interceptors. If we can't stop it in space, we hold it long enough to bring the rest of the fleet in range. Full power to the ion disruptors. We're going to slow it down, even if it's for just one more day." As the command rang out across the ship, Elara's eyes flared with the fire of someone determined to win, even when victory was a distant hope. Her officers began coordinating with military precision. But underneath it all, Elara felt it, the cold weight of the realization that no matter how hard they fought, the Lohk'ta was not a challenge they could face head-on. It was a force of nature, and they had nothing but hope and desperation to rely on. In the briefing room, the crew moved swiftly, pulling data, executing orders. Tension buzzed in the air like static, thick with anticipation. Then, just as Elara began to prepare for the next phase, a new report came through. "Elara," Harris's voice crackled on the comms. "We're detecting a massive energy spike in the Lohk'ta's proximity. It's activating some sort of graviton pulse, expanding its influence." "That's what it does," Elara murmured. "It can manipulate gravitational fields. It has the ability to crush fleets with the force of a planet." She felt the weight of those words settle in her chest. Humanity's best chance of survival rested not in their firepower, but in their ability to outthink their enemy. "This isn't over," Elara said firmly, her voice a rallying cry to her team. "We know what this creature is capable of. And we know what we're willing to fight for. We're not losing Earth today." She turned back to the holographic display. The shipyards and orbital stations they had fought to protect for years had already fallen, but she wouldn't allow their final bastion to be taken so easily. "We'll fight them in the trenches if we have to. But we're not surrendering." As the Lohk'ta's shadow loomed larger in the sky, Elara took a deep breath. In the face of overwhelming odds, humanity had always survived. And this time, they would survive again. Cliffhanger ending asterisk. As the first wave of fighters launched into the skies, the massive Lohk'ta descended like a death sentence. Elara's last glance at the earth confirmed her worst fear. The Predator's claws were already tearing through the city. But as the fleet rallied for one final stand, an unexpected twist unfolded. The Lohk'ta roared not in triumph, but in fear. And in that moment, Elara knew the truth. The Lohk'ta wasn't here to hunt humanity. It had been sent to test them. And it was terrified of what came next. End of Chapter 1. The roar of the Lohk'ta echoed through the shattered skies. The massive predator had breached the planet's atmosphere with a force that shattered every defensive system humanity had managed to erect. Elara Connolly gritted her teeth, her hands gripping the console as the holographic displays flickered. Earth's final defense was hanging by a thread, and Elara was the one pulling it tight. "Damage reports are flooding in." Lieutenant Calloway's voice was clipped, but there was no panic. They had trained for this. "Communications are nearly down. The Lohk'ta is on the move, and it's tearing through everything we've got. The orbital grid is collapsing." The words hit harder than any explosion. Every fiber of Elara's being screamed to rush into action, but she knew the battle wouldn't be won with sheer firepower alone. Humanity had no advantage in brute force. It was their ingenuity, their ability to adapt under pressure, that made them dangerous. "Status on the fleet?" she asked, her voice steady, despite the weight on her chest. "Fleet's holding steady in formation," Calloway reported. "But they're struggling to track the Lohk'ta. The creature's disrupting our gravimetric sensors. We can't lock on." Elara's eyes narrowed. Lohk'ta had the ability to manipulate gravity, disrupting weapons, shields, even the trajectory of missiles. It was an inherent advantage, a beast bred to control the battlefield in ways that could break even the strongest forces. "We need to fight smarter, not harder," Elara muttered under her breath, her mind racing. "Can we use the graviton pulse against it?" Calloway hesitated. "If we can't lock on, it's not possible." "No, it's possible," Elara said, her voice sharp as she turned to face him. "If we can't lock, we don't need to. We hit it with the pulse first. Adaptability, that's what makes us dangerous." She strode toward the tactical board, pulling up the blueprint of Earth's last orbital defense, the Vanguard network. The stations were far from perfect, but they had the potential to disrupt the Lohk'ta's gravitational control, if they could get them activated in time. "Elara," Calloway spoke again, his voice tight with frustration. "The Lohk'ta is already tearing through our fighters. We're losing ships faster than we can replace them. It won't matter if we disrupt the gravity." "It will matter," Elara interrupted, her eyes cold with resolve. If we can break its hold, even for a second, we have a shot. The Vanguard network was the key. Humanity had spent decades developing it, a series of platforms in Earth's orbit designed to control gravitational forces in the surrounding space. But they had never intended to use it against a creature like the Lohk'ta. Its power was almost mythical. Nobody had believed a beast could exist that could manipulate gravity with such precision. But now, Elara had no choice but to gamble everything. Calloway, get the fleet to circle around the central platform. We're going to use the network to slow it down, long enough to give us the chance to strike. I want every fighter squadron drawing its attention. You're asking them to draw the Lohk'ta in? His voice rose with disbelief. Captain, that's a suicide mission. I'm not asking them to survive, Elara said, her eyes hardening with the weight of the decision. I'm asking them to create a window. We fight to win, or we die. The fleet moved into position, a line of human-made ships attempting to fend off the might of the Lohk'ta. As they launched, Elara could see the streams of fire ripping through the skies, the chaos of space combat unfolding just beyond the windows of the Vanguard. Her breath slowed as she focused. They were losing, yes, but humanity wasn't ready to fall yet. They're in position, Calloway said, his voice a low whisper. All fighters are in line, ready to draw it in. Good, Elara muttered, turning back to the console. The pressure was building, the ticking clock almost palpable. She activated the comms. This is Captain Connolly. We know what's coming. We know we're outmatched. But we're humans. And we fight. Fight like you've never fought before. She paused, hearing the calls of acknowledgement from her crew. They were ready. Now, it was time to see if their plan would even work. The Lohk'ta roared again, an earth-shattering sound that rattled the ship's walls. Elara knew it was coming. The beast had sensed the fleet's movement, and was heading straight for the Vanguard's orbital defense grid. It didn't hesitate, its massive form cutting through the atmosphere like a predator honed in on its prey. The first wave of fighters hit, drawing the Lohk'ta's attention, but Elara could see them one by one, falling to the beast's massive claws. Their weapons had no effect, the Lohk'ta was too powerful. Activate the pulse, now! Elara ordered, her voice slicing through the air with the force of her desperation. The technicians worked quickly, their fingers moving across consoles at breakneck speed. The main Vanguard platform began to hum as energy pulled into the gravitational disruptor systems. The Lohk'ta lunged forward, roaring with fury as the disruption field came online, targeting the beast's gravimetric field. The result was instantaneous. The Lohk'ta froze mid-charge. Its claws extended in midair as if caught by an invisible force, the massive predator's body writhing against the shift in gravitational pull. It had been caught off guard. A momentary window had opened. Elara, it's working! Calloway shouted. We've got a lock on its core. The team fired on all channels, launching every missile, every shot they had left, into the creature's weakened core. For a brief moment, the Lohk'ta staggered. Its glowing eyes narrowed in anger, but it could not fight the sheer force of the gravitational disruption. But then, the beast did something unexpected. It bent its head, lowering its massive form to the ground in a gesture that was not aggression, but submission. The pulse, though weakened, had done something far beyond expectations. It had triggered a response in the creature, a response no one had anticipated. It wasn't defeated. It wasn't even dazed. It was bowing. The battle was far from over. But in that single, unexpected moment, humanity had accomplished the unthinkable. The Lohk'ta had been forced to its knees, not by force, but by human ingenuity. And as Elara stared at the fallen beast, a cold realization swept over her. They hadn't just fought the Lohk'ta. They had made it bow. The war was changing. And humanity wasn't just surviving. They were starting to take control. Cliffhanger ending asterisk. As the Lohk'ta lay subdued, another, deeper tremor echoed through the battlefield. The air crackled with energy, and Elara's heart skipped a beat. From the depths of space, another figure emerged, bigger, faster, and far more terrifying than the Lohk'ta. The Oort Consortium had sent its true weapon. And this time, humanity would have to fight with everything they had, because the Lohk'ta's bow was just the beginning. End of Chapter 2. The air was electric with tension. For a moment, the Lohk'ta lay defeated, its gargantuan form sprawled across Earth's scarred surface. But Elara Connolly knew better than to trust such fleeting victories. The Oort Consortium had more weapons at its disposal than anyone could fathom. And now, as the Lohk'ta lay prone, something far darker was emerging from the void. Captain! Lieutenant Calloway's voice was strained, barely above a whisper. It's not over. The pulse. It's triggered something. Something bigger. Elara's gaze snapped to the holographic display. The Lohk'ta had gone silent, but the air shimmered with an eerie, unnatural hum. The ground beneath the Vanguard trembled as though some ancient force was awakening. The monitors flickered, displaying rapidly increasing energy levels in the area. Elara's instincts screamed at her to take cover, to retreat. But there was no retreat anymore. We've never faced anything like this, Calloway added, his face pale. This is something else entirely. The comms crackled with static, then another voice emerged, cold, almost casual, like a final death sentence. Elara Connolly, we commend your tenacity. The voice was smooth, dripping with malice. But the Lohk'ta was never our true weapon. It was always just a test. Elara's heart sank. This wasn't an ambush, it was a demonstration. They had walked right into the Consortium's hands, not realizing the true magnitude of what was waiting for them. The display blinked, revealing the source of the disturbance. A colossal shadow appeared in space, far larger than any ship, any creature Elara had ever seen. It was not alive, but its form was a twisted mockery of organic and mechanical fusion, pulsing with dark energy. Elara, what is that? Calloway asked, his voice cracking. That, she replied with a grim finality, is the Annihilator. The Consortium's true weapon. The Annihilator was a weapon of total destruction. Rumors had spread of its existence, an ancient machine forged in the fires of a dying star. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't a creature. It was something far more terrifying, a living weapon, a machine powered by pure energy and designed to annihilate entire worlds. Captain, Harris's voice sounded over the comms. We've got a problem. The Lohk'ta is... Before Harris could finish, the ground beneath the Vanguard shook violently. The Lohk'ta was not dead. It was changing. Its enormous body rippled with energy as the creature's form began to shift. The skin cracked and split, revealing an intricate, glowing core that pulsed like a heartbeat. Its jaws opened in a grotesque display of strength, but its movements were now far more deliberate, its posture more upright, more intelligent. It's evolving, Elara whispered, realization sinking in like a weight around her neck. The Lohk'ta isn't just a beast, it's a biomechanical hybrid. The Consortium has merged its weapon with a living creature, a deadly synergy. Calloway's voice trembled. It's adapting? No, Elara corrected, her mind racing. It's evolving. The Consortium's weapon was designed to be something no species could withstand, but they're using the Lohk'ta as a template. It's becoming more than it was. The Vanguard-S systems lit up, an alarm ringing throughout the command center. All units brace for impact, Elara shouted. In the distance, the Annihilator fired. The energy beam that erupted from it wasn't just light, it was raw destruction. A pulse of radiant, burning force that ripped through space, cutting a swath through the fleet. Full evasive maneuvers! Elara barked, her heart pounding as the Vanguard shuddered from the near miss. Calloway, get me a firing solution on the Lohk'ta, now! But it was too late. The Lohk'ta was already charging. The monstrous creature, now more than a simple predator, used its newly enhanced form to propel itself through the atmosphere like a force of nature. Its claws dug into the ground, tearing through the earth with ease as it barreled toward the Vanguard, its glowing core visible even through the thick smoke and debris. Elara, it's coming! Calloway's voice was panicked. It's too fast! Hold your ground! Elara shouted. This is it. We've got one chance. She didn't wait for a response. Instead, she turned to Harris. Activate the Vanguard's last line of defense. I don't care if it's untested, this is our only shot. Harris nodded, his face grim. He slammed his hand on the console, and the ship's weapons systems powered up. The Vanguard's pulse cannons hummed to life, a low, terrifying vibration filling the ship's core. They were humanity's last attempt at countering the Lohk'ta's unimaginable power. We're ready, Captain, Harris said, his voice barely above a whisper. But you know this might not work. I know, Elara said, her gaze never leaving the advancing creature. But we're doing it anyway. Let's see if humanity's will can break this monster. The Lohk'ta was within range, its gargantuan form now more like a juggernaut, unstoppable in its charge. The energy from its core sparked and surged, sending ripples through the air. With a final command, Elara triggered the Vanguard's pulse cannon. A searing beam of concentrated energy lanced from the ship, striking the Lohk'ta directly in its glowing core. The beast let out a horrifying shriek, the sound piercing the air, reverberating through the hull of the Vanguard. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The beam held its ground, the Lohk'ta staggered back, its colossal body convulsing with the force of the impact. But just as Elara dared to believe they had won, the impossible happened. The Lohk'ta let out a blood-curdling roar, and the beam from the pulse cannon flared, dissipating like smoke in the wind. The creature's core pulsed with renewed energy, absorbing the full force of the weapon like a sponge. The energy burst from its body in a violent explosion, pushing the Vanguard backward, shaking the very foundations of the ship. It was then that Elara realized what she had done. She had made the Lohk'ta stronger. No, she whispered, watching in horror as the creature's eyes, glowing like molten fire, locked onto the Vanguard. It wasn't just a beast. It wasn't just a weapon. It was alive. And it was learning. And now, it was coming for her. Cliffhanger ending asterisk. The Lohk'ta charged again, its enhanced body moving faster, stronger, with intelligence and rage. The Vanguard was too far to escape, and its weapons were already on the brink of failure. As Elara and her crew fought to keep the ship in one piece, a new voice boomed over the comms, cold, cruel, and filled with unrelenting certainty. Elara Connolly, you have failed. Lord Zaratha's voice echoed through the ship. The Lohk'ta is just the beginning. The true test begins now. Elara's blood ran cold. The real war had just begun. End of Chapter 3. The ground trembled as the Lohk'ta closed the distance, its monstrous form like an unstoppable tide of destruction. The Vanguard shuddered violently under its assault. Elara Connolly's fingers flew across the console, trying to stabilize the ship. She could feel every tremor in her bones, each one a harbinger of doom. The beast had adapted too quickly, growing stronger with every blow. Hold together! She barked to her crew. We're not finished yet! The Lohk'ta surged forward with horrifying speed, its massive claws slashing the air. Elara's heart pounded in her chest as the ship's shields flickered. The pulse cannon had barely slowed the creature, and its glowing eyes locked onto the Vanguard, now more intent on annihilation than ever before. Every shot they fired seemed to have little effect. We can't outrun it! Calloway shouted over the comms, his voice laced with panic. The Lohk'ta is too powerful! Elara gritted her teeth. She refused to accept defeat. They had to find another way, even if it meant using everything they had left. Prepare for emergency procedures, Elara ordered, her voice cold with determination. Activate the Lohk'ta protocol. The crew exchanged confused looks. The Lohk'ta protocol was a last resort measure, a desperate gambit that had never been tested. But Elara had no other options. She was determined to go down fighting. Humanity was not done yet. We're activating the core destabilizers, she continued, eyes fixed on the oncoming beast. If we can't kill it, we'll make sure it doesn't leave this system alive. The Vanguard's core powered up, a deep, guttural hum vibrating through the ship. The destabilizers, long dormant, began to charge, pulling all available energy from the ship's reactors. The Lohk'ta roared again, its colossal form nearing the Vanguard. Core destabilizers online, Harris reported, his voice tense. This will trigger a chain reaction, Captain. It's not just the Lohk'ta that will be affected. The entire area will go up in flames. Elara's hand hovered over the activation button. The risk was enormous. If the Lohk'ta didn't fall within the radius of the blast, humanity's last hope would be obliterated. But she knew the stakes. I'll take that chance, Elara said, voice low. If I'm going down, so is the Lohk'ta. Just as she pressed the button, the ship jolted violently. The Lohk'ta had reached the Vanguard, its claws scraping against the ship's hull. The screech of rending metal filled the air, and alarms blared as the ship's integrity began to fail. But Elara held firm, watching as the energy around the ship intensified. The destabilizers hummed louder, reaching a crescendo of power. The very fabric of space around them seemed to ripple. Then, a sudden silence. The Lohk'ta froze mid-swipe, its massive claws hanging suspended in the air. For a heartbeat, the entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Elara's pulse raced as she stared at the creature, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. The Lohk'ta's body trembled as its eyes, once filled with rage, now flickered in confusion. Its previously glowing core dulled, the vibrant energy within beginning to fade. The creature staggered, then slowly, impossibly, it collapsed to its knees. Elara! Calloway's voice came through, barely audible. It's bowing. Elara couldn't believe it. The Lohk'ta, this apex predator, the weapon that had caused humanity's downfall, was on its knees before her. A chill swept through her as the truth dawned. The Lohk'ta had been nothing more than a tool. The Annihilator was the real weapon. And if the Lohk'ta was bowing, that meant only one thing. It wasn't just a predator, it had been programmed to obey. Elara! Harris's voice broke through her thoughts. We've got a bigger problem. Her gaze snapped to the display. There, in the distance, far more terrifying than the Lohk'ta, a new threat was emerging. The true weapon A massive, blackened structure appeared in space, unlike any ship or station she had ever seen. It was an unnatural, geometric monstrosity, angular, dark, and shifting like a living thing. It thrummed with an overwhelming energy, casting shadows over the Lohk'ta, which now appeared utterly insignificant in comparison. The Annihilator, Elara whispered, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. It was larger than any fleet they had ever seen, more dangerous than anything they could imagine. The Oort Consortium's true weapon had finally arrived. As the Annihilator neared, its massive energy field began to pulse, expanding like the breath of a dying star. The temperature in the cockpit spiked, and Elara felt the ship groan under the strain. The core destabilizers were still active, but the force emanating from the Annihilator was overwhelming. Calloway looked up from the screen, eyes wide with dread. Elara, it's a weapon of pure destruction. If it gets within range, it'll tear the entire fleet apart in seconds. Elara clenched her fists. We don't have seconds. She turned to Harris. Activate the remaining fleet. We need every ship, every fighter, now star. We're going to buy time, even if it kills us. Harris hesitated. With what? We've got nothing left to fire. We'll use the Lohk'ta. She cut him off, the idea taking root in her mind. We have no other choice. The Vanguard's remaining fighters launched into the fray, their engines screaming against the force of the Annihilator's pull. The fighters swarmed the blackened weapon, engaging with everything they had left. But the Annihilator wasn't even phased. Its energy field expanded, reducing the incoming fire to mere sparks before it disintegrated. Elara stood silent, watching the battle unfold. She knew the situation had deteriorated beyond saving. But humanity's final strike had not yet come. Captain, we can't hold it off. Calloway's voice cracked with despair. There's no hope. Elara took a deep breath. She wasn't finished yet. Not while humanity had breath left in their lungs. Her mind raced, piecing together the last pieces of their shattered defense. If we can't win with force, then we'll win with intelligence. We have one last chance. The Annihilator is nothing without its core. If we can penetrate its energy field and breach its core, it's a suicide mission. Harris said, shaking his head. Elara turned, locking eyes with him. I know. But this is humanity's last stand. We don't die today. The remaining fleet swarmed around the Annihilator, drawing its fire as Elara and her crew maneuvered the Vanguard into position. The energy field around the weapon surged, but Elara's calculated risk paid off. She fired the last of their weapons into the heart of the Annihilator's core. The ship jolted violently, its energy field destabilizing, collapsing in on itself. The Annihilator let out a final, deafening shriek before it exploded in a violent burst of energy. The shockwaves sent ripples through space, shattering the remaining fleet. Silence. The remnants of the fleet drifted in the aftermath. Earth was scarred, its future uncertain. But humanity had survived. For now. End of Chapter 4.